welcome to Cody Sutton with Stonewater Financial. He is here this morning and going to present to us on special needs trust and ABLE's accounts. So welcome, Cody.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for coming today. Like I said, today we're going to really kind of focus on special needs trust, ABLE accounts. You know, for a lot of people that means kind of the legacy planning side as well. The ABLE account really kind of ties in more of that spending plan right now also. But we'll kind of dive into the different uses and how to kind of strategically put these things in place and why you may want one over the other, why you may want both. Okay, so a little bit of history on me. So I have a brother with special needs, which is why I got into doing what I do. My practice primarily focuses on working with families with special needs. Okay, so all different areas of kind of the long-term planning aspect, all of the SSI, guardianship, trusts, ABLE accounts, all of those different things that, you know, maybe for a typical family, quote unquote typical family, things that they don't even have to think about that our families do. That's where we come in and specialize to make sure that we're doing things that, you know, we're getting and maintaining those government benefits through things like this, and also kind of making sure that we're not doing things that might derail that from a long-term perspective. Okay, we'll dive a little bit more into that as well. I'm also on the board for the ARC of Texas, which hopefully you guys have all heard of before. The ARC is kind of the biggest advocacy group. It's a big advocacy nonprofit for our families in the state of Texas. We were actually talking earlier about like the waiver interest lists and how short and quickly you can get on those those therapies and benefits. You know, it's only right now 18 to 25 years to get on it. So if that's not something you've heard of, definitely let us know. I know you guys have resources as well. You know, all I'd say, our practice does truly focus on, hey, how do we help our families, not just from a one-on-one standpoint, but from a statewide standpoint as well. Okay. We can go ahead and go to the next slide there. Definitely read over all the disclosures. You can skip that. So like I said today, you know, mainly we're going to be covering special needs trusts, how they work, why you set them up, the different types of trusts. Does anybody currently have a special needs trust that they are funding? Okay. Has everyone heard of a special needs trust? Okay. Has everybody heard of an ABLE account? Okay, good. All right, so, but yeah, we're going to kind of dive into what they are, how they work, how and why we want to fund them, when we want to fund them, all that good stuff. Just kind of give you guys a good perspective there. Go ahead. All right, so the special needs trust, the best way to think of a special needs trust is it is the tool that you're going to want to use to help protect your child's government benefits. Okay, so when we start looking at SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare, all those different benefits that we can be receiving, most of you have probably heard of the $2,000 asset limit, which means if we have over $2,000, our child loses, or if our child has over $2,000 in their name, they lose SSI. Okay, now that number hasn't been inflated since I believe it was 1972. So the government thinks that if you have $2,000, you're wealthy enough that you don't need any government assistance. Okay, so for a lot of families, you know, maybe losing SSI isn't the end of the world. You know, it's right now it's $967 a month, I believe. It just comes in as a paycheck to the child. What is tied to SSI and that benefit obviously is Medicaid. Okay, which is going to cover all the medical expenses. For some of our families, even if it's, hey, you know, I could do without that check, the Medicaid is the more important piece. Okay, now as long as we're receiving $1 of SSI, we can get Medicaid. Okay, the reason I say $1 is because when we look at SSI, the system is really meant to kind of work ourselves off of SSI. So if our child is working, easiest way to think of it, for every dollar we make, we're going to lose 50 cents of SSI. Okay, so if our child does want to work a little bit and kind of get some income coming in, let's say they're making $500 a month working a few hours, that doesn't mean that we lose all of our check, and so we lose, you know, maybe $250 of our check, but we're still making more, and that's kind of how that's designed to build us out. Okay, and then, you know, like I said, the $2,000 asset limit, I would expect that it's going to stay right there. So if you guys are looking at, okay, hey, maybe I have a 529 or I have an account that I've opened for them in their name and I'm just putting birthday money or something like that, and our child's coming up on 18 and we think SSI might be a benefit that we want to look at, you probably need to start thinking about something like a special needs trust or an ABLE account. Okay. The special needs trust, there's no upper cap on the funding. That's typically why people use it as well. A lot of times it's used as kind of that legacy planning tool, answering that question of what happens when I'm no longer here. Okay. For a lot of families, we don't even fund the special needs trust until the parents pass, because the special needs trust is meant to take place of the parents, everything that they're doing, all the transportation, getting the computers for school, all of that. The trust is meant to come in and help do all of that. Okay. The reason it's not going to affect our government benefits, though, is because it does have limitations. Okay. Meaning there are some things that the special needs trust cannot pay for because it can't step on the toes of government benefits. And that's how all the trusts are written. So it's not just something that, okay, we gotta kind of watch it. It's written in the trust that it cannot provide, for example, rent. Because rent should be paid by SSI. That whopping $320 a month, they think should cover the rent for our child. Okay. The reason, and we'll kind of get into different types of trusts, the main trust that you guys are going to hear and plan for and build is going to be what's called a third-party special needs trust. Okay, the reason it's called a third-party special needs trust is because the child never has direct access to the funds. Meaning, even if they said, okay, hey, I just want $500 to put in my account, you can't do that. The money cannot go directly to them. It provides for that in-kind maintenance and support. Okay, if they need a new computer for school, or they need Uber fare to get to school, whatever it is, the trust can pay for that, but it cannot give them the cash. And they cannot be the trustee of that trust. Okay, so we have to have a third party come in and be the trustee for that trust. Okay. All right, so switching over to ABLE account a little bit. So this was a tool created in 2014 by the Obama administration. And essentially, the way we see it is it was kind of a loophole put in because they didn't want to solve the problem of SSI. They just wanted to add kind of a loophole to figure out how to get it. And what I mean by that is the $2,000 asset limit they knew was too low, but they also couldn't just say, okay, well, we're going to increase it to X amount without, causing all kinds of stuff. So they said, okay, well, instead of doing that, we're going to give access to individuals with special needs to have an actual savings account that they can have in their name that will not affect government benefits. Okay? So the ABLE account is actually written off of the 529 code. It's 529A. And so it was written to where, hey, we can save for our child without having to set up a trust or do something like that. We can save, put money in here, they can work, put money in here, and it's not going to count towards that $2,000 asset limit. Okay? Well, just like everything with the government, there's pros and there's cons when we look at it, okay? The ABLE account has some of its own limitations. One is that once you do hit $100,000 in the ABLE account, which nobody really does because its max funding is $18,000 a year. But if you hit $100,000 you have saved up in that ABLE account, they are going to say, okay, you're no longer going to receive the SSI check because you have $100,000 that's just sitting there, right? But they will not stop Medicaid. Okay, so that is one very good thing that it's, hey, we're going to stop the check because you've got enough cash piled up, but we're not going to stop your Medicaid. Okay. The other kind of drawback is that it has what's called the Medicaid clawback provision. Okay, what that means is Medicaid has the first right to go in at the passing of your child and reimburse themselves for any funds, any money that was spent on your child. So if we save up $50,000 in this account, our child passes away and Medicaid says, okay, hey, we spent $40,000 on your child for medical care. They're going to come in, they're going to take $40,000 to reimburse themselves, and then you get $10,000 as a beneficiary, to go to whoever you allocate it towards. Okay? So, like I said, just like everything with the government, there's give and take there. But the best way to kind of look at it is a lot of people see the ABLE account as a little bit more of just kind of that spending account. Right? If we have a little, if we're looking at it and we know we're going to get up to $2,500 in our checking account, or the rep payee account. Well, maybe we need to go and just move $1,000 over into the ABLE account to where, hey, that it's not counting towards our asset limit, we're still sitting good, and then, hey, if we want to spend it on whatever we want, we can. Okay, and when I say whatever we want, anything that benefits the child with special needs is what the ABLE account can be spent on. So like I said, the special needs trust has some limitations on what it can be spent on. The ABLE account, they have left, I don't want to say just a blanket statement, but they pretty much said, hey, anything that benefits the child with special needs. Now, that gets into gray areas because, you know, what if my child likes giving gifts and they buy a gift for somebody else? Nobody that we know of has been audited on the ABLE account or expenses from there, but they do have the option to go in. They can say, hey, you're not spending this the right way. So, you know, just be mindful. Know that it's a pretty open door, but don't go crazy with it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay. So, kind of why would we want to create that special needs trust? Again, main thing is if we're trying to protect those government benefits and if we're trying to provide a lifetime plan for our child. Okay, so a lot of the planning that we do when we start building this out, when we're looking at the trust, like I said, we're not really funding until death because we as the parents are providing everything that is needed along the way. Right? And it's, you know, just kind of the understood that, you know, whether the family is like, hey, we're going to take care of our child until we pass, or hey, we're going to try to get them in a home with their friends, whatever that is. It's really put in place to kind of, hey, if we're no longer here, what do we need to drop into that trust to replace mom and dad? Okay. And I will tell you kind of from a sibling's perspective as well. My dad had conversations with me about this when I was like 15. And the way that he put it to me was, the best gift they can give me is for JD, my brother, to never be a financial burden on me. Okay, my parents, you know, they've helped me through college. They've done everything for me. The next best thing they can do is make sure if they're not here, he's well taken care of. Okay, so for example, we looked at it and, you know, just for round numbers, I'll say is $1 million that we need to go into the trust to take care of him for the rest of his life. That meant that of my parents' estate, the first $1 million is going to my brother. Okay, so there's no 50-50. Now some families are like, hey, we want it to be equal, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, but I'm just saying, coming from a sibling's perspective, even for us was more of $1 million needs to go to the trust no matter what. So if my parents pass away with $1,100,000, he gets the first $1 million, I get $100. Okay, if my parents pass away with $15 million, he's getting $1 million, I'm getting $14 million. Okay, the reason for that is for my brother, you know, this is, you know, personal situation, but as long as he has his Cowboys every Sunday and his Dr. Pepper in his hand, he's going to be pretty happy. You know, more money is not going to make him happier. He's living a great life. He's living with a bunch of his friends. You can't get much better than that. Okay, so it's not a money thing for him. It's just more of a comfort thing.
He lives with you?
No, he has like a group home that he lives in with a bunch of his friends. Yep. And that was, you know, another part of our planning was, you know, especially at 15, I was looking at it, I was like, well, I'm always going to take care of my brother. Like, I just kind of understood. My dad, you know, kind of, again, my dad's pretty serious when he wants to be. And he was like, you know, hey, you have to think of this also, you know, if something happens to us when you're, you know, 30, 35 years old, you're trying to start your family, you're having kids. If something happens to us, is he coming to live with you? Is your wife okay with that? Are your kids okay with that? And it was kind of eye-opening of, oh, you know, again, 15, I don't know, like, sure. But, you know, kind of the planning and having those conversations, I think, is really good. But for him, it was, hey, let's, you know, he's in a home. Now, he's there. He can be there full time. My mom picks him up every Tuesday to go to dinner. Every Thursday through Sunday, he's at my parents' house. So it's more, I think he's at home more than he's actually at his home. But for them, it was the comfort of knowing, hey, he's got a place that if something happens to them, it's not just, okay, hey, now you're going over here. So he's got a comfort spot there, and he has a comfort spot at home. Cool, yep. Okay, so kind of diving into the different types of special needs trust. This is what I was talking about. So starting with the first party, think of this as if you need this, you probably already have it. And I don't know if anybody does have this, but the first party special needs trust typically, in most of the cases that we've seen, comes from either like a medical malpractice at birth, or if there was a traumatic instance later on in life, and they were awarded directly funds to themselves. Okay, so the money went straight to the child, but then planning was put in place, attorneys got involved that said, hey, we need to protect government benefits. So the money was taken from the child, put into the special needs trust for their benefit. The reason you would do this is it gets the assets out of their name. So, we're no longer worried about that. If we're awarded $500,000 in a settlement, that's well over the $2,000. If we put that into a trust, now we don't have the funds, and now we can start getting SSI and Medicaid. Okay? First party trust, the reason it's not preferred is because if we pass away, if the child passes away, that also has the Medicaid clawback provision. Okay, so it gets the money out of our child's name to protect them and get their government benefits, but at the end of the day, they're gonna have to reimburse anything that was spent on them through Medicaid. Okay. From a planning perspective, I mean, like I said, for most people here, what you're thinking about when we just say special needs trust is going to be the third party special needs trust. That's the one we're saving or we're planning to put money into a trust to protect their government benefits, to provide that lifetime of care for them. Okay. The third option is a pooled special needs trust. That's actually run in Texas by the ARC of Texas. A nonprofit essentially comes in and says, hey, we've created these standardized documents to create a trust. So you can put into this pool with everyone else. You still have kind of your sub account in there where you have all of your account information, you're invested, you're doing everything as your individual, but all the trust is set up kind of as a pooled amount. Typically this is done when either a family doesn't want to worry about setting up a full estate plan on their own, or they haven't done it yet. It's kind of a catch-all, I guess you could say. Or if there's someone that, hey, we have nobody that we can have as a trustee. We don't know anyone that's responsible enough to act as a trustee. The pooled special needs trust would have a trustee that would help with those disbursements and funding and everything like that. Okay. So yeah, I kind of dove into it. You can go ahead and go to the next one. Again, third party, yeah, we can just get through, kind of dove into all of that already, I guess. You guys have the notes there if you need them too, but corporate trustees. So again, if somebody is sitting and they're like, I don't know of anyone that in my family or friend group or anything that I would want to be a trustee for my child, you can hire what's called a corporate trustee, where essentially, again, you're paying, typically it's like a percentage of assets that you're going to pay, that they provide all of the oversight for the trust, everything from tax filings to distributions and everything in between. Okay. Typically we don't see, and we don't want to see a corporate trustee as number one unless there's no other option. We would rather it be a family member or a friend or some type of guardian situation where they know the child. But it is an option. Where we do see this more is when we're doing our estate plan, we like every role to be 3 people deep. Okay, and it's a backup for a backup for a backup. So when I say people, typically the main people involved in your estate planning are going to be executors. That's who takes your will and makes sure that everything's divided as it should be. You're going to have your guardians. That's the day-to-day care, making sure they're getting everything they need. That's the person replacing you. And you're going to have your trustees. Okay, and that's who's looking over the trust, making sure that everything is running as it should, getting the funds invested, getting distributions, getting the tax filed. The corporate trustee, so again, all 3 of those roles we want to be 3 people deep, so that we always have a backup. Okay, because we don't know what stage of life that person's going to be in. We don't know if they're still going to be around. So we just want to make sure we have those backups. For the trustee role, we do like to see, even if it's in 4th, 5th, or 6th place, we do like to see that a corporate trustee is at least listed, because then we know no matter what, somebody's there. Okay. Ideally, yes, we have all of our friends and family, and they handle it all, and we never have to worry about a corporate trustee, but we do know at the end of the day, if a catastrophe happens or if nobody's able to do it, somebody is coming in to manage that trust. Okay. Cool. So expenses, kind of like I said, the special needs trust has limitations on what it can pay for. It also has a lot of good things that it can own or pay for. Okay, now I don't know if you guys know, but your child technically can own, even though there's a $2,000 asset limit, your child can own a home and a car in their name and it not affect government benefits. Okay? Some situations that works out, a lot of times it's better to look at it from a trust standpoint. Have the trust own the home if we're trying to leave it for the child, because then the trust can manage the taxes and all the any issues that come up. If an AC goes out, it's not our child trying to figure out, or the guardian trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? The trust steps in and says, hey, we're going to pay for this new AC unit. Okay, and so the trust is allowed to do, pay for anything up here, plus more. The only real limitations, like I said, are we cannot step on government benefits. So if we're receiving SSI is meant to cover rent, food, and miscellaneous is the third one. Okay, 1/3 of the check is meant to go towards each of those. So this can only cover rent. It cannot cover rent and food only above and beyond what can be afforded. Okay, so like that, we have to spend the SSI, the $320, $30 first from SSI, and then we can start spending from the trust if needed. But again, this is not money that's going to go to our child to go buy groceries. This is the trust coming in, buying the groceries to put in the house for the child. Okay, so there's no money transfer in that situation. Okay, cool. All right, so with the limitations of the special needs trust, again, it's pretty open, but there's, again, rent is a big key component, right? If we're paying rent all the time and the trust can't cover rent, that's kind of an issue. All right, well, I already told you the ABLE account was put in place to be the loophole, the legal loophole as we see it. So the ABLE account can pay for rent. That's benefiting the child to be able to live somewhere. So the ABLE account can pay for rent, anything else that we want to pay for. So if we run into a situation where we're paying rent with SSI but it's not quite enough, we can lean on the ABLE account to pay the rent. Okay, well, the next question is usually, well, what if we don't have money in there? What if they're not working? What if we're not funding the ABLE account? The special needs trust can actually fund the ABLE account. Once that money is moved into the ABLE account, we lose all of the special needs trust limitations, and now we get to look at it from the ABLE account perspective. So, $18,000 a year may not cover all the rent, but it might help if we need to subsidize the SSI that's coming in. Okay, and this is where a lot of people ask, well, do we want the ABLE account or do we want the special needs trust? Really, we should be looking at them both together. Okay, that's going to be your most efficient way to kind of plan and build things out is, hey, we want the ABLE account as our daily spending if we need it. Okay, that's the in and the out, because we don't want to pile up money in the ABLE account because we know it has that Medicaid clawback provision, right? So hey, we just want to put, we want to keep, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 in there that can just run through, but we don't want to, and we can't go and just drop $100,000 into the ABLE account. The special needs trust, like I said, there's no upper limit on what we can fund the trust with. So if we have, if we pass away and we had just sold our business, and we sold it for $10 million, we can go drop $10 million in that special needs trust for our child. Okay, and then every year if needed, we can fund that ABLE account to get around some of those limitations that the trust might have. Okay. Funding now versus in the future. Now this is, sometimes this comes to personal preference. There are some people that, hey, I'm just going to kind of fund it along the way, or I'm going to put, I'm going to set it up just as a savings account for my child. I'm going to put, $500 a month in here. Sometimes it's grandma and grandpa pass away, and they wanted to leave, little Johnny $10,000. Well, they can't leave it to him by name. So that's another thing. I would check with parents or anybody that, quote unquote wants to help. Make sure that they're leaving it to the right spot. Because if they're leaving it, if they just say to all the grandchildren equally, that's going to be an issue because that's to your child by name. Okay, we need it to be, hey, we need, all the kids equally, and then, essentially they have to kind of disown the child with special needs, and in their place, place the special needs trust. Okay, so that's typically where we see more of the now funding side. Is it's, you know, hey, we want to save up a little bit or put it in there. Most people, when we start looking at the future planning, it's part of their estate and legacy planning. Because like I said, right now we're caring for our child, we're making sure that everything is going smoothly, you know, getting everything that they need. When we pass away, we need to make sure that money is coming in that's going to replace us. You know, we're going to need a driver, we're going to need somebody to pay for those therapies or doctor's appointments or, you know, anything like that. That's where that special needs trust would come in. And so a lot of times it's more looking at it as, hey, when we step into retirement, we already know that as a family, we're not planning for just, you know, the two of us to live in Mexico all the time. It's, hey, we're now planning for 3 people to make it through retirement. And our situations are not a situation where, hey, if we leave a legacy to the kids, great, but if not, they're on their own. Our situation is we need to plan that we're living through retirement for 3 people. We have to leave a legacy. Okay. Also, when we start looking at the efficiencies of it, there's ways that we can leave money to the trust that are very efficient and, you know, tax advantaged, and there's ways that we can leave it to the trust that are not as great. Okay, because if you don't know the tax rate on trusts in general, very quickly gets to 37%. Okay, so if we leave, for example, an IRA that we've been saving into our 401k and our IRA our whole lives, something happens to us, we leave that 401k or that IRA into the trust. That's money that's never been taxed before. Okay, so now we went from our tax rate in retirement, whatever it might be, you know, hopefully 20, 25%, you know, looking at it, to, hey, now we've dropped in money that's never been taxed into a trust that very quickly is going to get to a 37% tax rate. Meaning, hey, if we leave $1 million, that's not $1 million of spending power that we have in that trust. It's closer to 600,000. Okay, where if there's, when we start looking at strategies, okay, well, what if we leave it this way or that way? If we live in retirement off of our 401ks and our IRAs and stuff like that, and leave different assets to the trust, like brokerage accounts, joint accounts, savings accounts, all that money's already been taxed, even Roth IRAs or life insurance, those are ways that we put in $1 million, they're gonna have $1 million of spending power. Okay. So from a planning side, especially looking at it, kind of that future planning side, we wanna make sure that we're kind of thinking about it from all angles, not just, okay, well, yeah, well, you know, 401k is my biggest asset, I'll just put the trust as my beneficiary. Okay. Go back, I guess, to the last one. So also on this, I think I forgot to put the slide in here, but the one big piece when we look at the funding of the special needs trust is it when we talk about the efficiencies, when we talk about planning on how to fund it, changing beneficiaries is going to be a huge piece. Okay, most people, they walk in, they utilize an attorney or something like that to do a special needs trust, get everything set up, they walk out of the attorney's office once they've signed and they're like, cool, it's all good, I'm all set. Not quite. Because the will and the trust only directs assets that do not flow by beneficiary. Okay, so what I mean by that is, our bank accounts and house and cars and all that, that's typically left in the will of how it's going to be distributed, where it's going to be left in the special needs trust or wherever. Anything that has a beneficiary that we have listed is not going to flow through our will. Okay, so think IRA, 401k, life insurance, some joint accounts, things like that. This is typically kind of what catches people. 20 years ago, you started working somewhere, you signed up for your 401k. You said, hey, I want my beneficiaries to be my spouse and then to my children equally. Okay, well, fast forward 20 years, something happens to us, we never went back and changed our beneficiaries because we didn't know we were going to have a child with special needs. Right? We didn't know we were going to have a trust, we didn't know we were going to do all this planning. We didn't change that beneficiary. Guess where the assets are going to go? It's not going to go to the trust. It's going to go to our child by name because we said to our spouse and then to our children equally. So when we're doing this planning, you have to think of beneficiaries also and think of all of the assets we have, how we're allocating them, and where it's gonna go. Okay? Not to scare you guys, it's just a point to kind of make of like, hey, we're looking at the full picture, not just, hey, once we walked out of the attorney's office, we're set, we're in a good spot. Okay? Cool, any questions on any of that so far? No? Cool. There are a lot of resources as far as like, how do we build the trust, who puts it in place, all of that. When we look at planning from an estate planning standpoint, there are ways to do it online and do a special needs trust online. Okay, and as a gap filler, I would say, when we're maybe younger or we haven't thought about retirement too much, we haven't thought about the long-term planning, it can be an okay like catch-all just in case. As we start looking at or wanting to put a real plan in place and solidify, hey, here's how everything is going to go, it really is beneficial to go speak with a special needs attorney, someone that specializes in this area. Okay, kind of think of it like the doctors we go to. If our arm is hurting, we're not going to go to the foot doctor. Same thing when we look at estate planning and planning for the future. We're not going to look at an attorney that just says, oh yeah, I can do it, or with a friend that says, oh yeah, I've done one of those before. We want somebody in this space that understands the laws, understands how quickly everything is changing, and can adjust to it. Okay, for example, in 2014, we had to rewrite all of the wills that we were coming across because the ABLE account came into play. It was created. So before 2014, the trusts were written that it can't pay out to any other account, right, other than the rep payee account. Well, the ABLE account comes into play. If we don't update our wills and trusts, now we can't even fund that ABLE account. Okay, so the laws are always changing, things are always updating. I would say that was probably the biggest change, was 2014 with the ABLE account, and when things like really had to be rewritten. Other than that, typically it's like little tweaks or changes, or making sure that, hey, if we have somebody as the executor or trustee or guardian, that we can update those if they're no longer around. Okay, but definitely working with an attorney that specializes in that area is good. Making sure that they understand the language that needs to go into the trust. It truly is as simple as we have seen one word that was put into the will or into the trust incorrectly, and it blew up the whole trust if it would have been put in force. Okay, so it's those tiny little things that can kind of derail the full plan if we're not working with someone that specializes in that area.